So, okay, is it
Oh,
better?
there you go. Nice. Look at that.
Oh,
I
what?
think
It's like interesting. It's every time it looks like I literally need to unplug and plug the mic. So,
yeah, sometimes that happens.
okay. Yeah, so basically the previous part wasn't that important. So don't worry about the
Yeah,
volume.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
We
no, we actually shared like the most important secret that you might have to rewind and like
yeah.
listen like closely
So
to
you can go
what we
back and
told,
listen for a
the
secret
tip of the
and
day.
yeah.
Yeah.
So basically we just said hello and we
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
along those lines. And yeah, it's nice to see Alex here. Are you Alex actually at the grandma's house right now, or you're back in yours? And anyway, the plan is that Alex is gonna most likely join us next week if he's gonna be available. Because
Nice.
I had a
Nice.
question on
Awesome.
Twitter. What's it like the first 2 weeks on a job? And I thought that there's no one better than Alex who just was in that situation. And as far as our main team, we have Are you passionate about this? And effectively, I was listening to, again, one of my favorite podcasts, The Indie Hacker, and there was a creator of the Banner Bear on. You can check it out. It's a really cool company. And like, he made this very successful company. He makes more than, I believe at the moment, like 30 grand a month revenue and everything. But what
Wow.
was really interesting, like he shared tons of useful tips. And again, if you're interested, go and check it out. But I think the one that like really stuck with me was the fact that he said that prior to this one, he built a bunch of them, and actually one of them failed not because he didn't know how to code it or whatever. There was actually a market share and everything, but he just wasn't passionate about it, not as much as he needed to be. And basically, a competitor showed up, and they were just releasing like more features than him, and eventually he just lost the steam. He was like, "Look, I'm not really interested in this. What I'm doing anyway. So, I'm just gonna basically quit." And now, what he always says right now is if somebody asks to him like, "Look, is this idea like great and whatever, where I can make the business?" He's like, "That's actually pretty irrelevant. Whether the idea is good, you need to think whether you are really passionate about this one." Because if you have a competitor with the same idea and they're more passionate, when you are tired, they will be still working. And to me, I can apply this to multiple things, whether that is, the job search or it's even while you're building the projects. So for me, again, it comes down to something that we talked about with Alex few live streams ago, where he said, look, you need to be kind of clear of why you're doing this. Like, there's nothing wrong if you're doing this for money. I mean, money is a great motivator, but is this going to be something that gets you out of the bed when you don't feel like it? Because you are literally the same as in business. You're competing with 100 people for the same job. So, you will have people who have, kind of no problem working while you are tired. So you need to like understand why you're doing this. And again, this is not me saying that you need to like, I don't know, uh, love the code. So like, I don't know, have all house like painted in code or what. That's not what I'm saying. Like for me, again, the reason of why I was doing it, because I didn't want to do my previous job. Again, I really like coding and everything, but put that aside, I was also really motivated because I didn't like doing that. So whether that is your family, whether that is, I don't know, freedom, let's say that you want to work from home or whatever the case may be, but you need to find that something that will like get you out of the bed like when you don't feel like it, because that's the moment when you'll be working when somebody else is tired. And as far
Yeah.
as the projects, I just quickly want to mention that when you're working on, let's say, when you build a project during the course or whatever, and then you want to make it your own, I also strongly suggest pick something that you're interested in. If you don't want to build e-commerce, don't build e-commerce. You can take the same features, whether that is filtering, whether that is pagination, whatever, and apply to, I don't know, animal shelter, if that's more interested. And what you'll notice as you're working on that project, if you're interested in that, if you're passionate about it, you will have way better results and you'll enjoy the process way more. So that's about it for me. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's definitely important to have passion for coding, because you want to be able to have the motivation, or at least enough like invested in not to give up. And like I used to take that for granted because like I think like I learned to love like to code, and I really like the idea of solving problems. But it is, like I do take it for granted because I think that everybody likes coding. And if you don't have passion for something, it's really hard to stick with something. And I'll give you an example. I'm not saying anybody should do this. And this is something like my fiance pointed out, like, because, and it's not a good thing actually, but the fact that I'm able to do it because I enjoy coding. So I started like after work. I Yesterday I finished work a little bit earlier because I wanted to do this side project that I was doing. So I started it at like around 3 p.m. and I literally sat from 3 p.m. till 5 p.m. today in front of my computer working on this project that you know and I kind of time boxed myself. I'm like, look, if you don't finish it by today, 5 p.m., and I started like earlier than like, just last night. I was like, just stop, because otherwise, you're going to sit here forever. But like, she like tried to stay up with me because she wanted to keep me company, and then she ended up going to sleep at like 9 a.m. this morning. And then when she woke up, I was still working, and the first thing she said to me, "Paul, you got to go to the bathroom. You didn't like get up from this computer. What is going on with you?" And I'm not saying that's like the healthiest way to do it, but if I did not enjoy the process, that would be like super painful for me to like do that. But because I do like it and I am, passionate about it, and like I'm able to do that and put in the time and do what I need to put in the work. But one thing that I want to say about that, when I started to code, like I feel like passion, like the coding around passion, like I don't want to like misquote it, but I don't think I always liked it. I think I eventually started to like it. So sometimes when you're starting out and you're learning new things, you might not even know what you like. But for me, like I think it's like over time I developed this relationship where now I'm like, oh man, I really, really enjoy it, and I will like I don't mind putting in whatever time like I need to at work. But I think like just want to put that out there because sometimes when you start something, you might not feel that passion yet. So, you still have to have some grit, when you're starting out to make it through the process. But yeah, if you're not passionate about stuff, it's kind of hard to do, because it's
No,
so hard.
that's a very good point because for me it was similar how it was for you. It wasn't like I remember when I first initially like tried coding sites and whatever, I really liked it, but somehow I never stick to it. Now on the upside, I never hated it. So
Right.
let's say
That's
when
the
I
key
was
right
really
there.
into it, I was into it. And then something came along and then I was, needed to study or whatever, and then, work came along. But I don't ever remember when I really hated it. So I'm just like the kind of make sure that you don't hate it. But that's a very good point where initially maybe it's not going to be the only thing you want to do, but over
Yeah.
time you'll kind of I guess it also depends as you're making more complex applications. You
Yeah.
really get this kind of adrenaline, I would even say, from
Right.
like, oh wow, I made this and whatever. And I also actually, while we were talking, I just remember one thing where during the podcast they were talking about that when you're talking about indie hacker, you basically what you have is something called runway where you have some money saved up, and then whether that is for 3 months, 6 months, or whatever, and then when you run out of that money, that's it. You need to make decisions and whatnot. And what they were talking about, this passion and losing the steam, they were even saying that, look, it's one thing if you run out of money, you can be like, I'm going to take a part-time job, but I'm going to still
Yeah.
work on my company. But if
Exactly.
if you lose the steam, if you lose interest, there's nothing anybody
Yeah.
else can do. That's it. And this has just reminded me how when you went to, I believe it was Texas, right? When you were still determined to get the job, and you were like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna work part time in a whatever
Yeah.
grocery store or store anywhere, right? And I'm still gonna be coding. So this is for me that kind of passion where I know my path, I know where I want to go, and these are the kind of sacrifices that I need to take and whatever. So that kind of to me shows that someone is for real, basically.
So like we had a new hire at my company, and he went to boot camp, and interestingly enough, he said he ended up going to boot camp, but he literally said to me, he's like, "Look, all that stuff that I learned in the boot camp, like I could have learned online, but what the reason why he still went to boot camp is because he wanted to have a community where he gets to work with real people in like real projects." But the point is, like, he had to work really, really hard. He told me his schedule. They would go to class at 8 a.m. and then they would finish by 9 p.m. It's like an all day thing. And then he would still stay up till like 11 or midnight coding on his own as well. And that was like nonstop for 3 months. And it was like a super huge commitment. And, if he didn't like what he was doing, like, I don't see him being able to keep up with the process. But what's interesting enough, I was talking to him, and because now all he does is coding. He like really enjoys it. Very smart kid. And this is another point I want to bring up. Like, people have to realize that everybody who's trying to get into coding, they're not trying to do it like, okay, what's the fastest way to get a job? They're literally interested in it in some way, that they have some sort of like pride in being the best that they can. So the competition is high, even amongst like self-taught developers or bootcamp developers. So you have to put in the work. And talking to him, like, I asked him like, well, how was your life when you were studying and learning to code? He was like, I worked really, really hard. And after work we had a conversation. I was like, so what do you do for fun? He's like, well, I used to write these little skits, and I used to do this, I used to play tennis. And he's like, but now when I became a programmer, I don't do any of those things, because now all I do is sit and code and learn stuff. And I'm like, yeah, because you have to. There's got to be like part of your life that you dedicate to continuous education. And I'm like, kind of listening to him. I'm like, yeah, like I used to do jujitsu all the time. Now jujitsu to me, it's like a passing hobby that I might go back to, because, and I'm not saying you're not going to have hobbies, but like there's that passion for coding where you almost have to be told do it less, because you like fell in love with it over time, and now you're like, oh my god, this is so awesome. And this is kind of like I told you earlier about not frustration, but when you're learning new things or working with a new thing. I'm not going to mention it now because whatever, but I was building this like application yesterday for something, and everything that I knew how to do before is done differently. And it was like so frustrating, because it's almost right, but it was wrong. And so I had to constantly look at the documentation and see the new way of doing things. And if I didn't like it, I would have like kicked my computer across the desk and, stopped like earlier. And so having passion, and I'm a big believer in developing passion, like you could learn over time to like something. Um, you know, but you definitely need it. And uh, just to kind of tell you about my mindset about passion, because I hate when people say like I just was born with it and I have this passion. It's like something you develop over time. But I was talking to a friend of mine who gave me this statistic. I don't even know if it's true anymore, but he says like, did you know that the divorce rate in um, people who have arranged marriages versus people that marry each other just because they had the freedom to marry whoever they want are less. And the reason he said are less is because when two people get arranged, they're already going to it like, okay, we're strangers. It's like, I know I'm not gonna like magically fall in love into that person, but I'm gonna give my best to the relationship. And so over time, through giving their best, they eventually have a bond together and fall in love, and their bond becomes like much stronger. And I feel like that's kind of like coding is. It's like you might not really, really enjoy it yet when you start it out, because you're gonna be like, this is hard, this is difficult. But over time, you will find this appreciation, and you're gonna be like, man, I really, really like it. And then like you could code for hours and never stop, which also becomes a problem because you want to be able to take bathroom breaks, apparently. So
No, it's definitely true. Like when, as far as the more coding I started doing, the less I was interested in kind of like watching sports and whatever things I was doing before. Now there's still like bunch of things that I enjoy, but there was a point, like Paul correctly mentioned, that where essentially it felt like before coding I was looking for stuff to fill up my time, and now it's the opposite. Everything is filled with the coding, and now I'm just looking what things I might want to add, just so it's not all, whether that is specifically some hobbies and whatever, like making that schedule, making sure that it's always, kind of, there is some kind of balance. Otherwise, again,
Yeah.
if you're, I mean, there is such thing as burnout if you're doing like 80 hours in a week and whatever. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah, for sure.
it's an interesting, it's an interesting one. Yeah, where I mean, that passion is tricky. It's not. It's yeah. When somebody says, "Oh, I was born with it," it is kind of like, well, okay, what else there is to add? But for me, definitely one of the things, and maybe it's just for me, I don't know, but for me, one of the things was that whether I loved it or didn't love right away, the coding, it was definitely the best job that
Yeah, yeah,
I ever had up to that moment. So
yeah,
maybe if I were Batman or whatever, some kind of
yeah.
superhero,
You probably
maybe
be like, oh my god,
sitting
yeah,
by the computer wouldn't be the, but like compared to jobs that I had, I was like, look, like it's like you're talking about that arranged marriage, right? So you understand
yeah,
that, okay, maybe it's not whatever the job may
yeah.
be. I mean, the James Bond or whatever, right? But it's much better than what you had before. So I guess that,
Yeah, but coding is definitely up there in terms of like nicer jobs to have. And like sometimes I hear people like, well, you didn't really code enough, you don't understand how companies work. And I my answer would be to those people, it's like you never had a shitty job before to compare it to understand that your job coding, like I have a friend, he makes like bajillion dollars like at his job, like I mean he does good, and sometimes he'll complain about it. I'm like, and he's been like he had those bad jobs, but it's just he's been in such a great job for such a long time that you kind of like start to forget. But like I think like out of all the possible jobs you could have, like coding is not a job where you're gonna complain too much about. Like so it like from the scale of like what's the worst possible job or hardest job you could have, it's not coding. Like
yeah,
I mean
I have
from
to
a standpoint,
I
you
have to
know.
admit, this week I was a little bit triggered where
Ooh,
some
triggered.
famous YouTuber or whatever just popped on my Twitter feed. I'm not even following him, but he basically along the line said like, "Oh, you know, that something Svelte versus React," and he's like, "Front end is a mess and whatever," and I'm just sitting by the computer. And I literally like I usually don't get triggered by those things, but I'm like, you don't have the smallest idea what it's like, to earn your money in whatever the case may be in
Yeah,
industry,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
You're just, like, and again, this is not some kind of, oh, he didn't work or whatever. I don't care about that. What I'm talking about is
yeah,
you do not understand like what you're talking about. If you're complaining about something silly, Svelte
yeah.
versus
Oh my
React,
god.
and then
Oh
the whole like I like these like blanket statements like, oh, all front end is, because there's so many frameworks or whatever. Well, first of all, there's not that many. Second,
no,
there's a clear, like you have choices,
clear
and
winners.
yeah, and so this idea that, oh well, there's always like something new. Well, yeah, but that's also like part of the cool part of the industry.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I was triggered this week by that particular
Yeah,
post.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like, I love like the YouTube game, but it like if you want to be like very successful on YouTube, you got to play the YouTube game, and so you have to create some sort of like flashy,
Drama.
not like controversies or dramas, but like yeah, kind of something to kind of get it going. And but yeah, so but like everybody I talk to who's really serious about switching jobs into development, like they know that YouTube, there's certain channels. It's just like entertainment, or like it's fun when you get caught up in like watching the videos, but you're really not moving the needle in terms of getting a job yourself. And those people know that, and they quietly, self monitor and select what they watch on YouTube, who they follow, and most importantly, they do the work. And they don't make like you know complaining videos where it's like, oh, I went to boot camp and it was terrible and I couldn't get a job. They just do their work, they build their portfolio, they get hired, and um, they get to where they need to go. And like this new hire that I talked to at my company is like, because I'm very interested in people like what is their motivation, what is the process they followed. That's why it was great, like chatting with Alex. It'll be nice to have him again next week, because you want to hear that experience. And at the end of the day, if you're to kind of pull everything away and kind of get to the bottom, those people, they just made a decision to do the work. They didn't jump from one shiny thing to another. They had a plan and they just stuck with it. And they all had this attitude where they're not going to take no as an answer, regardless how long it takes them to get hired. And so I feel like a lot of people, they have these success stories like, well, I got my job in like 3 months or like a year, or like it took me 4 years. And it's like fault of my own actions why it took so long. I'm sure if I was a bit smarter and was more consistent, I could have gotten the job sooner. But those are the mistakes I made, and it prevented me from getting into the field way faster than I wanted to. And it's like a personal journey. But at the end of the day, that responsibility falls on you, and you need to do the work to get there. But after like everything that I know, and like where I've been, and kind of seeing other people around me who I saw start from like step zero, I think a year is a very realistic timeline, realistically, to be able to get your foot in the door, where you're making, 50, 60, or even $70,000 a year. It's possible for sure. And I've seen a lot of people actually that I became friends with, like they weren't developers yet. And then, just recently, like I had a bunch of people like, oh, I got my first job, or I got this, I got that. And kind of seeing their journey and being like, okay, a year of consistent work, for sure, you're going to be able to get there if you have a plan, but you got to do the work.
Yeah, that's something that it was interesting also for me to find out. One of the students uh, that I talked to, I know that I have quite a few, I would say, that are in the boot camp or finished the boot camp, but somebody that I talked to, and she mentioned that the quit rate after the boot camp is very high. So that's one of those things, like you need to kind of just keep pushing. No one guarantees you anything or whatever. It's up to you. It's not about boot camp good or boot camp bad. It's about whether you continue pushing
Yeah.
yourself, learning, and continue with the process, and then you will get the job. It's if you apply, if you like do the work and everything, it's gonna happen. But I was really surprised that I kind of thought that everybody who's spent like 3 months very consistently coding, it's very hard for me to kind of drop everything in one day and then I don't know, go back to construction, for example. I cannot
Yeah.
imagine
Yeah.
that, right? No, I
Yeah.
understand that you need to pay the bills. I get that, but I kind of see that as okay, I can do, let's say, the work, but then I'm still doing the coding because I spent those 3 months I coded, and it was very surprising to me that actually it's not always the case. So
Yeah. The reason I really get excited about programming is because if you have, like, if you do the best that you can and you put in your work, like 3 months from now, you're going to be a better developer. Like that 3 more months from that point on, you're going to be at a higher level because you're constantly learning new things. So just by nature of the job, if you do things with some sort of like competency, you don't even have to be smart. Like if you guys knew what kind of grades I got in school, you guys would be like, Jesus Christ. But like you're always improving your skills and you're always developing yourself. And this is something that I really like about coding, where like when I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a terrible martial art if you want to like get a black belt really fast, because on average it takes like normal people like 8 to 10 years to get. And if you're like abnormal, like BJ Penn, who like I think got his black belt in 2 years because he's like a nutcase. It just takes a long time. But the cool thing is, if you just show up and you continue to go through the classes, you continue to learn, your skill is going to improve, and it will eventually become a black belt. And there's no like taking that away from you. It's the same thing to me that like I like about coding. It's like the same thing. Like as long as I show up every day, I'm going to be a better developer over time. And to me, like if that like if you're improving yourself by a little bit every day, you're going to reach to a point where you are going to be hireable, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts, because you have the skill. And what's interesting, like when I code now, I still run into issues, but they're issues now, like, I still feel frustrated because I'm like, oh, I don't know anything. But those issues that I'm running into, they're like higher level challenges that I haven't encountered yet. So yes, I might feel like, oh, like like I still feel sometimes I don't know what I'm doing, but I am doing that at a higher level of a developer, and so I'm solving harder issues than I did when I first started out. And so you might feel frustrated because there's always challenges, but you're still doing things on such a higher level. So if I go back even like 3 months or 2 months or maybe 2 weeks and look at the code, like the code that I'm writing today is better just because you're constantly getting better. And because of that, like I love programming because I know that if I continue on this trajectory, I'm going to become more valuable to the company I work for as a developer. So they're even either going to have to give me a raise or another company will give me more money because you're constantly improving your skills. Where like if you're working at certain jobs, you know, like I used to do a lot of masonry work, and you get to a point where you could only like provide a certain value. Like I'm bringing sandbags with sand, like in my thing. Like you can't, like how much better can you get at that skill? You know what I mean? And so you eventually get to a ceiling in what you can do. And same thing with like McDonald's. And when I worked at the supermarket, like I was a personal shopper where I basically would shop for people and put food for them and then put it in the bags. Like how much better can I get at that? Like, in terms of like the type of skill it is. And so this is why like I love coding, is because there is a ceiling
Sky's
in
the
your
limit.
career, but the sky is very, very high, and you could get there within 3 to 5 years. You could change your life like you wouldn't believe. And I'm right at that point where I'm starting to see that, because when I first started out, like I was making 13.75 an hour as a React developer, which was insane. But like I'm making 3 times as much now an hour, and like I'm getting so many different opportunities now that like I'm like, wow, like it, like if somebody told me, you're not guaranteed to succeed, but in 3 to 5 years you're gonna like triple your income. And some people be like, yeah, 3 years is too slow. Like, I mean, get the hell out of here. There's no other job unless you're doing something illegal, where you're going to create that type of
But
income
those are the same
or
people who in
self-employed.
those 3 years are in the worst spot probably than they're right
True.
now.
Exactly.
And to add to that one, kind of to one of your points, so I definitely like even just a sentence. I really enjoy the book, but I just enjoy the sentence where basically be so good that they cannot ignore you, so good
Yeah,
that they
that's
can't
a good
ignore you.
one. Yeah.
And the second one is kind of when I was reading Atomic Habits. It's about doing the small work but doing it consistently, and he talks
Yeah.
about a lot this compound interest. So we always just think about compound interest as stocks, but he was just laying out example after example. So let's imagine that you decide that every day I'm going to read book for 1 hour or whatever. In 1 week, in 2 weeks, in 1 year, like how much better can you get? And it's the same with the coding. It's like it's the same with a lot of skills that you do. People don't like, they always kind of, it seems to me like, how it goes with New Year's resolutions, that first week in a gym, it's always packed in January.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
then,
Eventually,
and then
it's
and
yeah.
then it goes back to the same people who come there day in and day out. And it's not about doing, 70 hours 1 week and then 1 hour the next one because you get tired. It's, for me, it's always about like, look, come up with a system that you can do, that that you'll get better, right? So you're applying yourself, you're actually dedicating hours, you're making those sacrifices, but still within reason where that you're gonna keep doing. And then over time, over that month, 2 months, 3 months, you'll literally see how you have grown. And it's like you're talking about, where when it comes to problems, the difference between expert and you is just the fact that that expert has hit that problem
Yeah.
10 times already.
More.
So
Yeah.
what
And they already
happens?
know what to expect. Yeah.
So what happens after those 3 months, 6 months, whatever? Like you just said, you're not going to be like challenged by the problem you already solved 10 times. You're going to be like, okay, now I need to solve this and this feature in my
Yep.
application. So
Yep.
now I'm going to that next step. But the idea is the same. It's really about that compound interest that you all the time just build on top of the knowledge you already have. And by the way,
Yeah.
can I just go to the little bit lighter note? So Engine Boy left a comment. Coding after 30 is having the highest level of patience. Think of one our stream talk with no response from you viewers. And
But
this is exactly why Paul is here, because he does all the talking. Because otherwise, I would be done in 5 minutes.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't see
What's
myself.
funny about that? It's like I'm literally sitting doing the stream. I'm like, I see no one is like saying anything, and instead of being like, yeah, because you forgot to go live, you idiot. I'm like, oh, I guess people just don't want to watch my show. And you know what? I'm like, I'm fine doing this like by myself and continue to work through it because, like I said, number one, I talk more than anybody. So to me, it's not a problem. But also because I know it's the price I have to pay to get better, and so I'm gonna show up and do the work regardless if anybody's showing up or not. But at the same time, yes, my feelings are hurt. Like there's zero people, and I'm like, oh God, what am I doing that for? But I still gotta show up. And I was like this is coming back to this idea like you do have to be passionate. So when you have moments like that, it doesn't kill your like wind in your sail and get you like so upset that you quit. You just look at it like, oh, it's part of doing the work. Some days are better than others. So let me just be positive and keep moving forward.
But I
But
think he meant
yeah,
kind of more of a like the level of talent that you have. Because for me, one of the reasons why, like again,
I'll tell you my secret
I
in a
enjoy
second.
talking to you on these live streams. I enjoy talking to everybody else. But
Yeah,
also, one of the reasons why I like them is because I'm really bad in this kind of. I can talk if I see the code. I can
yeah,
explain. I can go into details, whatever. Sometimes I repeat myself 50,000 times. But if, let's say, I need to explain how to sign up for a service, those are the worst videos. They're like 2 minutes long and it takes me like 1 hour. Because unlike you, I cannot talk about like general stuff like that. It's so for me, imagining like if I were to have like 1 hour of live stream talking on my own, I would just, I don't know, in 5 minutes I would be like, yeah, you know what, I really said already everything. So the point of
yeah.
this story is this: Paul is lifting this live stream on his broad shoulders because he always
But
just takes the conversations.
the sad truth is that if you're like the less like smarter you are, the more you have to fill in that space with words. So that's why I talk a lot, just talk nonstop.
Okay, now,
Because I'm just
yeah.
kidding.
Now we all have
No,
to say that Paul is no, yeah. He's just
no, I'm
this,
just kidding. I'm
he's
kidding.
just
Like I
playing
just
on
love talking.
emotions.
Yeah. No, no, but that's fine. I'm just making a joke. But
No, I
like
think that you can clearly see that you work with people. Basically, that's the difference. I
yeah,
think that.
right. I was gonna say I have patience because for majority of my life, like I worked with kids, like
Mm.
and it's different when you have your own kids because you're gonna love your kids. Like it's different, but when you work with other people's kids, you're gonna have kids that you just don't like at all. Like, and you still have to be like, listen, I'm just being honest. Like I even had parents who didn't like their own kids. Like, ah, I mean, kidding, but they're like, Jesus Christ, like this, I want to strangle this kid. So you just have to be like they're kids. So you can't be like, "What are you doing?" They don't get it. So you have to be like, "Oh, okay," and you have to be patient and you have to kind of, work around it because it's the way it is. So getting beaten down by kids for like 20 years, like I have like really good patience, but it's not forever. So like people that know me, like my sister, my fiance, like my mother, they know that I could be very impatient. So it's like you get to see the best patient behavior, but that patient does it's like it has a limit, like like people say. But yeah, it's funny.
Oh, that's weird because for me, I definitely also, if I would have to pick my own like kind of worst quality, that's definitely impatient. That's something that I've
Yeah.
worked on like pretty uh, religiously, but I'm still failing at every turn pretty much. I've done books, I've done all kinds of things, but
Yeah.
maybe it's a little
Do,
bit
do
better.
you
But
meditate?
no, so
There you
that I
go.
didn't get to that
There you
maybe
go.
point.
Yeah, because
Maybe
you don't
that
have enough patience.
maybe that's the thing. But that's definitely, and construction definitely didn't help because
Yeah.
it was pretty typical there that the only kind of conversation there is yelling and screaming at each other. So you kind of, it's very hard to come back to that one after that, in a sense that you just kind of you lose it, in a sense that you don't have that patience maybe that somebody else who can just like be slowly or whatever. You just like
Yeah.
get irritated over pretty much nothing. And April has a really good one. Is anyone can help me with how to make my resume? I have no experience in work and I am newly graduate. So Alex mentioned one of your videos. Didn't you have one on how
Yeah, I
to
have
set up?
like a yeah, it was like a long live stream I did where I had a couple of resume videos, but the one that is like really good where I showcase how to take like having no experience and how to write a resume based on the projects you completed yourself like at home and make it look as that people won't be able to tell the difference. And you know and I show you how to like write the resume, the steps. I'll have to find that video. I'll have to share it on Twitter again. But it was really good because I feel that a lot of times we feel that it's true. Like you need to have eventually working experience, but you can't get that experience if you can't get hired. So you have to somehow be able to write a resume. But what I came to, like my mental thought behind this, what I realized is that the difference between me doing work at home on my personal project and like you have to like obviously try to do your best, and the difference between me working at a company that I'm working at now, the work is the same. The difference is I get paid, from my company, and for my personal projects that I do at home, like I don't get paid for them. But from experience of like learning to code, it's still the same code. I'm still doing the same thing. So like, you know, I'm very like big on don't be shy about talking about that experience. But at the same time, with that being said, like there's a way to do it and present it on your resume that like, and I kind of show it in my example. I had two different resumes. One resume was based on my real like experience working, and the other resume was just based on the personal projects I had. And from a glance of like an eye, like you can't tell the difference. Like you wouldn't be able to tell like, oh, those are all Paul's personal projects, or oh, those are Paul's working projects, because it was presented so well. And at the same time, you want to make sure the projects that you're building, they're good enough that when people see them, they look like professional sites. But that's a whole other like topic we could talk about. But I'll have a video, I'll have to link. But short story, even longer, is that um, if your resume doesn't follow like the typical layout of what a recruiter or a hiring manager expects from interviewee, like in terms of formatting, you will not get any hits. So sometimes like the bit like 80% about your resume, is it formatted correctly, in terms of like what people want to see. So I would suggest uh, free code camp, like Google like free code camp, how to write a resume. They had a very good comprehensive article on how to do that, and how to talk about your project. So definitely start there, and I'll definitely try to find my video, and I'll make another one. But it is a really important part of being able to present yourself well enough to get a job, for sure.
So we have here from Casey Nam. Hi, I'm learning Node.js to build manage my own little e-commerce website, but then I keep hearing PHP backend is 70-80% of all the e-commerce sites out there. Is it true? Now, Alex already responded. He's like, it's more about 40. I don't know the real numbers, but I mean, you would think that, PHP is popular and the same as Node.
Because
Now, few
WordPress.
things that I want to add though, I think it's an awesome uh, kind of project to learn how to make whatever React Node or whatever the technology. But I personally would, if I were to run my own e-commerce, I would use Shopify or I would use Snipcart, which basically is already solutions like the all the
Yeah,
logic and everything behind it. Because you need to understand that when it comes to e-commerce, it's not just about putting the products and
yeah,
putting the pictures on the screen. It's taxes, it's all kinds of regulations and everything. And I personally, if the goal is to sell stuff, not to deal with that stuff, I would just use that. And then if you want, let's say you can build a nice front end that you use for Shopify or for
yeah.
Snipcart or whatever. But all the logic, I would definitely leave it up to them.
So here's the thing, like before, like WordPress was obviously like a very, very popular, but with companies like Shopify, who even had like their own WordPress like plugins to make it easier for people who are using WordPress and PHP to integrate Shopify. But the interesting thing here in terms of technology, and where things are moving, like yeah, maybe at one point, you know PHP sites were more prevalent, but that number is definitely decreasing. And one example of that with Shopify, they released their own like Shopify React, like you could call it library or wherever it is, which is all already integrated with Shopify. I think it's called Oxygen. It's basically React with like integrated with Shopify, and that's using React and JavaScript. So like the shift is changing, and when you see like companies like Shopify, you know, uh, making investments in like React and all this other stuff, I'm like, you're not going to go wrong, learning React and Node.js and JavaScript based stuff. With that being said, there's nothing wrong with PHP, and like there's jobs in PHP as well. But if you like React and you like JavaScript and that's what you want to pursue, just pursue it. And there's plenty of jobs, and there's like a lot of stuff. Like one thing I was actually just recently was thinking, because I've worked with a bunch of different companies. I've created stuff with WordPress, like a full project where you like it does something. Then I did something with C Sharp and React at my previous job. I also knew somebody who used like Python with like Django to build their app. And now I'm like really excited about like Strappy and like Node.js and Koa.js. I really like the JavaScript ecosystem, and I'm able to build projects with those languages. And what I realized, and then like I knew somebody, I don't know why, but they use like Angular for whatever reason. But the point, what I'm saying is that at the end of the day, someone who has a business, they're looking for a solution. And that solution is how can we serve our customers best, and they don't really care if it gets the job done. They don't care if it's PHP, they don't care if it's Django, they don't have the JavaScript. And the reason why I'm saying that is don't try to like get carried away. Like just make sure you pick one tech stack and you stick with it, as long as it's like anything modern and popular. And in like current kind of situation, you can't go wrong with JavaScript and like Node.js, and eventually, like if you want to pick up a second backend language, you could do so. But definitely, I committed to only do JavaScript stuff at the moment, and it's there's no short there's no shortness of opportunity if you're good enough.
For me, I would like add few things here. First, the reason why like e-commerce are good projects, even though yes, you can say that it's everybody, whatever at this point is probably using it or whatever, but you can a make it your own, and b why it's really good because a lot of e-commerce is are going to be actually your employers. Like my first job that I was hired here in LA, it was actually like a small, tiny company, agency, I would say, even though it's kind of it was weird. They were like working from their own house where they were living. But anyway, this is a separate story. Yeah, but it's a big thing to build Shopify front end. It's not, it's a very good business to be in. If you have multiple businesses that need that front end and whatever, and that's going to be the case where, um, yeah, that's why showing that you can make those features showcases that you understand, uh, basically that how to do that. And what else I wanted to mention? You know, what would be interesting. I would want to get basically somebody here. I mean, not maybe not as a guest. I don't think that they would come on, but it would be really interesting for me, for once and for all, to hear from somebody. Okay, like I like JavaScript. Awesome. But let's say if somebody wants to learn PHP, let's say somebody lives somewhere where PHP is the king. Like what is the proper path? What are the courses to take? Because this is something that it's not enough talked about because clearly whatever you have on like
That's
Udemy
opportunity. Yeah.
is definitely outdated.
Yep.
There's
For
nothing
sure.
like so if somebody wants to go, at least you can point them
There's
to
one like good like PHP, and it was like and WordPress course recently updated, and the instructor is like a nice guy. I forgot what it is, but it's like out of all the PHP courses on Udemy that I saw, um, those were like that was the only one that I was like, okay, it's worth like, and it's not that it's just based on like how many good like JavaScript courses there are, PHP courses there's not that many, and they're not like they're all outdated like you were saying, so like you might learn stuff that is not even going to help you. Yeah, it's just interesting how it's hard to find certain topics. Like C sharp is also weirdly there. It's hard to find like really really good tutorials and videos compared to JavaScript. I think JavaScript just rules
No,
everything.
JavaScript is. I think JavaScript is one of those things where what's the saying? A rising tide lifts all the boats.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Because you literally can see the kind of how the course has evolved. How one
yeah.
instructor makes the course and then the next one picks
That
it up and
everybody has to. Yeah, yeah,
takes it further, and then there's additional projects, then there's additional setups and whatever, and it's constantly this moving process where and those old courses get kind of filtered out where if
yeah,
you're not updating the course, eventually
yeah,
you will
yeah.
start
Get
dropping,
buried.
and the ones that are updating the courses are actually getting to the top. We have few questions here. So April is asking about the designer for the backend, for the background for the Stripe project. So that's one of the projects we build in Vanilla JS course. So that particular one, April, is not. He doesn't. I emailed him a few weeks ago. I needed something done, and he didn't respond. So I'm assuming it doesn't work. But the safest one for you to be, if you cannot find uh like the SVG background yourself, the one that was created, you can look for again, go to Upwork, go to whatever. Fiverr is also one of them. Just type, look, I'm looking for a designer that this is what I want. This, like, you can even take a screenshot of that background and showcase. Look, it shouldn't cost you more than $5. I mean, if that is even like pushing it, it's like for them, it's the setup is like 30 seconds or whatever.
Yeah, it's Fiverr is amazing, especially if you do and like the research and you find some with like the really good like rates, score. It's amazing what you could get done. So like a year and I like ago or so, I had this itch. I'm like, I want to get back into jujitsu. I'm going to open up a school. So I needed to make like a logo for my new school. And I was like, I don't want to pay a lot of money, but I don't want to create it myself. So I used Fiverr and I was like so impressed with what I got for $50, which was like amazing. And it was so good that I almost started teaching Brazilian Jiu Jitsu again based off how awesome the logo was. So Fiverr is like definitely like, and then I literally had to stop myself and be like, Paul, you can't do that because then you're not going to improve as a developer. So I gave that dream up. I mean, it's not even a dream. I already did that, done that. And so there's no sense of going back to something you done and or like, there's, like just gotta do something different. But yeah,
You know what I've noticed that by usually by the end of the stream we start getting the questions. So it's literally we go all the
it's
way to
normal.
like
You know.
50 minutes, and then we start getting the questions that we were looking for when it was 30 minutes.
So
Sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
but
go go go
there's
go go
one
go.
like really kind of happy news that I want to mention that last week alone I had, I believe, four people. Not that they reached out to me. Some of them did, some of them didn't. Some of them just left a comment or whatever. But people who have been taking my courses got hired, which is just awesome. Like every time I hear that, that's the best. And some of them were even listening to the live stream, and they were saying thank you for basically keeping the what's the spirit up, or whatever the case may be. So I was really glad. Like every time I hear that, that's the best thing that you can hear as a content producer, that somebody gets hired. And especially I think that was the main goal for this live stream, to kind of guide people
Yeah,
and
yeah.
tell them uh that our stories and whatever, and if it's really helping, I'm really glad. And why I'm saying that, because we have Jason, who has been one of part of our crew, and he's like, hey guys, I just started applying this week, already had my first interview today,
Nice.
and second round with coding challenge next week, all thanks to knowledge and inspiration in your videos. Awesome, Jason. Again, just keep it up, and we really want to hear the updates and everything, and wishing you all the best. And if you need some advice or whatever, just reach out, and we'll try to.
So here's a funny question. Someone says, "Will uh, coding be replaced in
Oh, I
5 years from
saw
now?" And
that
so,
one.
to me, like this is what I'm going to say: the only time it will ever be replaced when a customer is able to like explain their requirements to an AI, and the AI be able to understand what the customer wants and we'll build a thing. Basically, it will take a long time to get to a point. As long as there's like stuff where you're working with other people, you need to have, like, I don't think it's all going to be automated. What I do see is that it's going to be more prevalent, and you could see it already with GitHub Copilot, which will allow you to work much faster and do stuff much quicker. So what I would say is it going to replace all the developers? And the short answer is no. And the long answer is yes, in a sense that people that, used to fix typewriters, and when keyboards came out, they're like, oh, I don't want to work with keyboards. Or when the computer side come out, it's like, oh no, I'll just keep fixing typewriters. Yeah, those people will lose jobs. But if you kind of stay on top and you kind of understand all the changes that are happening. So I embrace like the use of Copilot to increase my productivity as a programmer, not because like, oh, like it's going to replace my job. No, it's going to make me more productive as a developer. So yes, there's going to be all these things that are coming out. So you have to basically learn how to use all the new tools that are coming out to be able to work together with AI, I guess, if you would say, to uh, increase your productivity and to be able to get more work done, because that's what is going to be a thing. It's like, are you able to use it as a leverage to get more stuff done versus somebody that doesn't? So like I don't think like jobs will disappear, but I think you just have to keep in touch with what is happening and not be afraid to be like, hey, the world is changing, let me change with it, rather than being like, I'll just do the same thing I did the day before, you know?
Look, this is one of those never-ending ones. I've been listening about this, I don't know, since whatever, since 20 years already, probably, about something, taking away jobs and doing, like, there's a difference between, like Paul just said, if you actually keep up with the newest technologies, I don't think that you'll be left out of work. And this idea that AI is just gonna replace everybody and whatever, that's just one of those. Again, it's just easy to make that kind of statement and then don't even think through it. And I don't think so. That's gonna happen, because if you look at how the web has been progressing and everything, there were different technologies before, and so what? Those people evolved.
Yeah.
Now, are you going to be like adding content per se? Let's say that's like you're just adding content for some kind of WordPress site. Probably no. Probably that will be,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's just this idea that somehow, some way. I like few quotes. First of all, I like the one what when the customers will be able to explain to a robot how to make something,
Yeah,
then
that's the
then
one
then
that's, yeah.
then you should worry. And also, there's have you heard of the what's the name? It's something similar with those site builders. There's
Yeah.
always uh like that. Oh, site builders will like destroy all the web developers
No,
and whatever.
no.
And there's he's called
I
the
mean,
CSS King or whatever. Kevin, I believe he's Kevin
yeah.
Powell, and I
Yeah,
liked
yeah.
it.
Nice guy.
I liked
Really
his
cool guy.
tweet. He's like, yeah, I just he in one of his videos he tried it out and he's like, yeah, I don't think they're coming for our jobs anytime soon. So he built the
Yeah.
site with the regular site builder, and it's again one of
Yeah.
those just like there's certain people like we have talked about this about
Yeah.
WebAssembly, for example. They just like to make these statements, and then everybody needs to rush there and like say, no, no, that's not. It's like, look, if that's how you feel, awesome. That I don't. So yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree 100%. I think like you'd stop worrying about like you not having a job that you don't even have now because you're too busy watching the wrong YouTube content and worrying about if AI is going to take over your job. Just go code something and apply for goddamn work. You know what I mean? It's like that's it. It's like, because if you constantly live in fear of like your job disappearing, you'll never get anything done. Like I literally blindly said to myself, I'm going to be a developer. I'm just going to do what it takes to get hired, and here I am. But if I had to worry about, but funny story about like all that stuff, like the web site building sites, they've been available for years. Like Dreamweaver back in the day, like people used to, and it's still like, it's and what's interesting, like at my job, a big part of what we do happens with us discussing understanding customer needs, understanding how they use the application, knowing like, are the features we're creating, are they going to solve the customer problems? So AI would not be able to kind of figure that out, like, unless, like you said, they could interact with the customer on that type of level. But I definitely see UI AI making it easier for you to scaffold code out, and to get stuff done way quicker. But in terms of doing the actual like part, and one example I want anybody to try, you know how you have your like your fancy phone, and like it'll recommend words, like if you like someone types to you like good night, and you start typing stuff, and then it will auto recommend like good night also, and like whatever, you think like, oh, my phone is so smart. So play a little game, just do autocorrect nonstop for like 5 minutes and see what you end up with. You will get with a paragraph that's complete gibberish. The more you do it, the more like unruly it gets. Like, so AI is smart, but it's only smart if they're humans that at this point able to guide it, making like reasonable approaches. So there was an excellent video where they said like, can AI make better music than a human? And what's interesting, if you give it like limited like teaching, so you train the model like the AI, but you don't overdo it, it will actually make some good stuff. But if you continue to train and train and train and train without really having your own say in what you do, then the music AI creates will sound like something made in hell. Like, it's like completely not like human being pleasant to hear. So there is a limit. And so I feel there's a great book called like I don't know if I would recommend it now because it's already like old, but it was called like The Average is Over. And this guy kind of talks about how like AI is going to take a bigger part in our lives. And in his book, he kind of talked about, chess players who used to play human chess versus human chess. And then, when human players started playing against computer chess, it got to a point where there's no chance of a human beating a computer ever.
Mm.
And so what happened, instead of trying to, like, as a human, you're limited in what you could do. Like, you obviously not going to outsmart like the greatest AI in the world. So they have, I forgot what the style of chess was called, but it's basically people that train the AI, and then the AI plays versus another AI. So it's like this whole other level of chess. And that's kind of the point I was trying to make earlier, is that just embrace the fact that AI is going to be available. No, it's not going to take our jobs. But if you could use it as a tool to leverage your productivity, like these, to kind of merge to do together, you will always be more hireable than someone who is afraid of like, working on those tools. Like, because I talked to a bunch of people, like, because I started using GitHub Copilot like as soon as I could. But I had friends like, oh, that's cheating, or it's like, it's not fair because you're not writing the code. I'm like, bro, have you used Git Copilot? Like, it's not going to write the code for you itself. It will give you really good recommendations, but I have to know what it's recommending. I can't just kill like spacebar, 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 or tab, 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 and my application is going to be done. No, my application is going to break. So you need to like kind of know what you're doing. But I type way faster with Copilot than I do without it. And what's awesome about it, like, this is what I like it, is because once your application gets to a certain size, GitHub Copilot kind of learned from your application and already sees some of the common patterns that you used. So let's say I did like a screen where I had a table, and now I'm working on another screen that has like similar table functionality. And so it will recommend, based on the patterns already used in my code base, those same patterns. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do here. And so I'm like, tap, 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 tap. Because so it's basically, to me, like, GitHub Copilot is just like a fancy, autocorrect for coders. But you still have to know what it's recommending, because GitHub Copilot has recommended some things that I'm like, oh, nope, that's not going to work. That's not it. And so you just kind of have to be able to tell the difference.
No, but for me, it also comes down to, okay, so what? So let's
Right.
say, if you cannot predict what's happening in the future, no one knows. So
Yeah.
what's the solution? To what? Crawl under the bed and then cry that that one day your job is going to be taken over, or you just evolve with whatever's happening in the industry. It's the same, like, pretty much the same topic that we have talked about it before, where, again, I cannot stand when people say, oh, but it's gonna take me 5 years and whatever. Okay, but what are you gonna do in the meanwhile?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
if I know that, okay, in 10 years job is gonna be taken away, so what is the solution here? So let's just cry about it all 10 years, or let's just kind of evolve with whatever is happening. And I also want to mention one thing where it's if you just believe the news all the time, you need to understand that. I mean, and again, I'm not like for anti some kind of whatever misinformation here. This is not what I'm saying. But what I'm trying to say is that you also need to understand that when it comes to any kind of news, they will try to get something the eyeballs. So where I'm going with this, that they every time they'll say like, "Oh, these jobs will be lost, those jobs will be lost." Yes, certain jobs will be lost, but no one, for some reason, doesn't talk about the fact that there's also going to be jobs created. As
Created
you're
for sure.
creating
Yeah.
that technology, there's also going to be somebody who needs to work with that. So, I mean, this idea that, again, everything is going to end in 2 years is just ludicrous. I'm sorry.
And to add to this, since we're already on this tangent, so uh, they've been using AI in medical field to basically look at images like for brain scans or whatever, and the AI has been much more accurate at predicting if someone has cancer or not than the human doctor who went to school for bajillion years to get that job. So, first of all, I think doctors will be replaced by AI way faster than us developers. So, I'm just going to let you guys like think about that. So, don't worry about like, if your job's going to be replaced because the first people in line to go, it's obviously going to be the doctors. The doctor's going to go because if the AI could do their job better, but then if you follow that right to its natural conclusion, if you're at a point where your job is replaced by AI, like as a developer, that means by that point in the future, everything has been automated by AI, and the only jobs that will be available are like people basically talking on YouTube. Even that will be replaced by
Even
AI.
that,
So
there's going to be a
yeah.
robot.
So basically, we're going to be living in the matrix. So don't worry about it. You know what I'm saying?
So
Like it's
maybe
like
we won't have to work.
yeah,
And to
exactly.
to add to that, uh, all this talk about AI, and then a few days ago, I learned that the biggest, one of the biggest hospitals, basically in the, I would even like one of the best hospitals, let's say in the United States, is still using internally only Internet Explorer. So good luck with that AI
Uh,
setting
listen,
up everything.
yeah, here's the crazy thing. Since you mentioned that, I worked for an insurance company, which I'm not going to name right now,
E
but
By the way, Internet Explorer 11, I believe, or whatever, something.
whatever it is, I stopped using Internet Explorer like 10 years ago. Just let's put
Exactly,
that
and
out
they
there.
have to suffer
Yeah.
through that every
Yeah.
day.
So I worked at this company where they had like first of all Windows like 7 computers. This was like 3 years ago, which is like how like you even able to run a company. And there it was an insurance company. Their main program that powered everything was written like in this language that nobody even knows it anymore, and they can't even refactor it because to refactor it would cost like billions of dollars. But at the same time, like it's already not working. And so to me, like when I was working there, I was like, how can you not fix it? And the truth is, for big companies, like small like companies that are very like lean, like change might be rapid, but for some of these established like banking industries or huge companies or huge hospitals, just the like idea of changing something or upgrading is such a huge cost for them that a lot of them like they literally like, okay, the stuff you're using is to get the job done or it doesn't. So like the change is going to happen so slow. It's not like overnight people are going to be like, oh, let's use robots to do everything. But
Yeah, I was.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. You just mentioned the big industry, so I just saw a video, basically a snippet of the video with Elon Musk interview about cryptocurrency, where he said that uh, the banks still use the mainframes with Cobalt, which is like
Yeah,
totally
yeah,
like
yeah,
way,
that's kind of like
way,
what
way
you're using
back. So when we talk
at
about
the
these
company that I
rapid
work for.
changes and whatever, it's again, I'm not of that pessimistic mindset that I mean, otherwise, what's the point then? Then we might as well can hang up and I don't know, go and sit on a beach all day.
Exactly.
Anyway, we're sorry. Do you wanted to finish the point there?
No. The point is that don't worry about AI. Like, we've been talking about AI since like so long, and yes, it's getting better, but like, don't try to like like to get like I'm just trying to like think how to say it. Don't try to lose the job that you didn't even get in the first place. Like you're like talking about like, oh, it's gonna never I'm not gonna become a developer because like you no, just get the job and work there and then see what happens. Don't try to like talk yourself out of a job that you don't even have. That's basically what people say like do when they say, oh, AI is gonna like replace jobs, or the easy wig like drop and drop website creator is gonna replace jobs. And here I am when working as a developer for like almost 4 years, going on 5 years now, because I'm just like, yeah, maybe that's the case, but today I'm gonna do it myself. You know what I mean? I'm gonna do the job myself. So don't like try to
For me,
like
it's like, look, control things you can control, get better
exactly.
all the time. If you have a job, then get better at your job. If you don't have a job, get better to get the job. And don't worry about something that, again, either you hear it in news or YouTube videos or whatever. Don't worry about things you
It's
cannot
like
control altogether anyway.
why didn't you ask that girl out? Because I knew that in some future path she's going to break up with me and find somebody else. It's the stupid logic, you know what I mean? You guys need to be smarter than that and just get the job for today. So I'm going to leave you with this random tip, which blew my mind because I gained some weight. I'm not really happy about it. And when you gain some weight and you wear clothes that's tight, like you don't feel comfortable, and you just keep telling yourself, I'm going to lose the weight, I'm going to lose the weight, but the whole time you're not losing the weight, you're still not feeling comfortable. So I went and I searched some like how to dress for like whatever body size you are, and I heard the best advice. And the guy said, it's like, look, maybe at some point you're like on this exercise routine, you're going to lose some weight, that's going to happen, but that's not where you are now. So he says, buy the clothes for the body you have. So at least you could feel good and confident where you are today. And it's like the same thing. Don't try to worry about a future problem that didn't happen yet. Make sure that you're doing the best thing you can with where you are today. And what's interesting, I actually went out and bought proper fitting clothes. And my whole perspective of myself and how I feel about myself changed because at least I am comfortable where I am. And I feel like that's kind of like similar to this question, is this going to be replaced or that's going to be replaced? Just focus on where you are now and do the things that are within the reach of reality right now, which is like within a year, like anybody could, because I've seen other people, not just me, like it took me 4 years, but I've seen other people within a year change their lives, go from zero to working as a software engineer, and people are doing it left and right. So that could be you. Like you just have to do the work and not like you know John, me, everybody else, we all have that same 24 hours in a day. So if you spend like 80% of your time worrying about problems that you can't control, like John said, like you're not being very productive with your time. So just focus on what you need to do and you will change your life, definitely within a year. And so that would be my kind of like the closing thoughts. Just do what is right for you for today and don't worry about future problems because they might not even be a problem. You just don't know. You're not psychics, so
Yeah, I had I liked really quote that I heard. Not even a quote. It was more like that. Basically, worrying about things that you cannot control in the future is like sitting in a rocking chair. That you're kind of, something is happening, but nothing really. You're just like
yeah, yeah,
you're
yeah,
just
yeah,
like rocking, but there is no point. You're not going anywhere. You're just
yeah,
sitting in that same spot. So that for me is how I always, every time I start wondering something about the future, something that's gonna happen in the future. And again, those are I'm not worried about AI, but of course I have things that I'm worried about the future. But what I always come down to, like, is the fact that do whatever you can do today and then worry about whatever is going to happen later, because again, those things might not even happen, and you're just kind of wasting your time right now on worrying about something that you cannot control at the end of the day anyway.
yeah, yeah,
We are
100%.
117 in. I think we're call it a day. I mean, this was
Sounds
awesome.
good.
Friday. Everybody,
Yeah,
happy
good times.
weekend.
Always good times.
Enjoy.
Yeah,
Yeah, hopefully Paul gets some rest because
yeah.
he's
Oh my
he's
God.
pulling the midnight on midnight
Yeah, both
whatever.
like all the ends, burning it on all the ends.
Yeah,
What's
yeah,
funny is like I literally was trying to stay up until like jumping on the call, and Arya's like,
Mm.
no, just take a nap. I'll like wake you up. And then I literally blink, and it's already been an hour. She's like, Paul, you got to do your live stream. And like I could tell she just wants to let me sleep, but she knows like I love these live streams. And so I was just literally like woke up 5 minutes before, and I was like, man, like this is gonna. But it's always fun, always glad. Like thank you all stopping by, and John, having conversations with you is always great, you know. Um, and it's like we're in a living room chatting, which is
Yep.
awesome.
This is our
And so
Friday hangout, and
yeah,
yeah,
Friday hangout.
and yeah, thanks to Paul for always being a trooper, a true trooper, and thanks to everyone who watched, who's gonna listen this later. If you're getting this
Yeah,
something out of this, I mean, there's nothing really much more we can want. So yeah, have a awesome weekend. We'll see you next week, and thank you to everyone
yeah. Thank you all.
who joined us. Awesome. Have a good one.